My name is Ross, and at 32, I thought I had it all figured out. Good job as a software engineer in San Francisco, my own apartment, financial stability. But one thing I could never solve was being the family outsider. Last Christmas, I discovered I wasn't invited to the family dinner through my cousin's Instagram post. Then, the very next morning, I received an email from my mother, an $8,100 invoice for my brother Jake's Disney cruise. What I did next changed our family dynamic forever. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, trust me, what happened next changed everything about how my family sees me now. I grew up in suburban Chicago in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family from the outside. My father, Richard, worked in insurance, climbing the corporate ladder at a respectable pace, while my mother, Diana, taught third grade at the local elementary school. We lived in a 4-bedroom house with a decent backyard, took modest vacations to Wisconsin dells or Michigan beaches, and generally had what most would consider a comfortable life. But beneath the surface of our family photos was a dynamic that shaped my entire childhood and followed me into adulthood. My younger brother, Jake, just 2 years behind me, was unquestionably the golden child despite consistently underachieving in almost every area of his life. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Jake would bring home a C- art project, it would immediately claim the central spot on the refrigerator, adorned with multiple magnets and parental praise. Meanwhile, my straight A report cards and academic certificates would be briefly acknowledged before being filed away in a drawer. "That's just what we expect from you, Ross," my mother would say, as if excellence should be invisible, while mediocrity deserved celebration. Our family dinner table was perhaps where the dynamic was most painfully obvious. Jake could interrupt any conversation with a mundane observation about his day, and both parents would pivot toward him with rapt attention. When I would try to share news about winning the regional science competition or being selected for an advanced computer program, my father would nod distractedly while keeping his eyes on the television, or my mother would suddenly remember the laundry needed switching. "Richard, did you hear what Jake said about Coach Miller putting him in as quarterback for the second half?" My mother would gush, completely talking over my announcement about making the dean's list. "That's great, son." My father would beam at Jake, while I sat with my unfinished story about academic achievements hanging in the air. My high school years only amplified this pattern. While I was excelling in computer science and math, winning state competitions and building a future, my parents were more concerned with Jake's struggle to maintain a C average and his position on the football team's bench. I remember the crushing disappointment of looking into the audience during the state computer science championship and seeing 2 empty seats where my parents promised they'd be. I later learned they had attended Jake's football game instead, even though he played less than 5 minutes in the fourth quarter when the game was already decided. "Jake really needed our support today," my mother explained afterward, not acknowledging that perhaps I needed their support too. I worked summer jobs from age 16, saving for college expenses and buying my own clothes and school supplies. Meanwhile, Jake received new clothes, the latest gaming systems, and was even given a car for his 16th birthday, despite having no job and mediocre grades. When I asked about the disparity, I was told, "You're so responsible, Ross. Jake needs more help than you do." That phrase became the unofficial family motto regarding us brothers. Jake needed more help. Jake needed more attention. Jake needed more resources. Jake needed more understanding. And I just needed to understand that and get by on my own. Despite the lack of parental support, I managed to secure a full scholarship to Stanford, moving across the country to study computer science. The day I received my acceptance letter should have been one of celebration. Instead, my announcement at dinner was met with nodding and quick congratulations before the conversation turned to Jake's troubles at community college, which he would ultimately drop out of after 1 semester. "Your brother is having a hard time finding his path," my mother said defensively, when I asked why my accomplishment had been glossed over. "Not everyone can be naturally academic like you." My college years passed with minimal family contact. While other students received care packages and regular calls from home, I'd get the occasional brief email asking how things were going, but mostly checking if I could send money home to help out with family expenses. I later discovered these family expenses often included bailing Jake out of financial troubles or funding his latest get-rich-quick scheme. After graduating with honors, I moved to San Francisco for an opportunity with a promising tech startup. My career trajectory was steep, advancing from junior developer to senior engineer within 4 years. My financial success came quickly too, allowing me to live comfortably in one of America's most expensive cities. Back in Chicago, Jake continued his pattern of job hopping, lasting 3 to 6 months at various positions before quitting or being fired. His reasons were always external: bad managers, toxic workplaces, companies that didn't appreciate his creativity. Despite his employment issues, he somehow maintained a lifestyle that included a nice apartment, frequent vacations, and an impressive collection of gaming equipment and sneakers. The source of this lifestyle became clear during family calls. My parents were subsidizing him heavily, often stretching their retirement savings to help Jake through this rough patch. What they didn't mention was that this rough patch had lasted for nearly a decade. Despite the growing distance between us, I continued sending money home regularly. Christmas bonuses, portions of my salary increases, and special occasion gifts all flowed back to Chicago. Sometimes the money was for specific purposes, like when my father needed dental work not covered by insurance. But often, it disappeared into the family fund that seemed to disproportionately benefit Jake. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the child who had been deemed so responsible that he needed no support was now the financial backbone for the family that had overlooked him. But I kept hoping that my contributions would finally earn me the place in the family I'd always craved. Holiday patterns established over the years reinforced the family dynamic. It was always expected that I would travel to Chicago for celebrations, burning my vacation days and spending hundreds on last-minute flights. The idea of my parents or Jake visiting me in San Francisco was met with excuses about travel costs, despite my offers to cover expenses or complaints about California being too different from their Midwestern sensibilities. Previous Christmases had been exercises in emotional endurance. Gift exchanges were particularly revealing, with Jake receiving thoughtful, expensive presents while I typically got gift cards or practical items like socks and razors. One year, my parents gifted Jake a $2,000 gaming computer because he needed it for his graphic design aspirations, though he had shown no previous interest or aptitude in that field. That same year, I received a $50 Amazon gift card and a book about retirement planning. I tried to win approval through my own gift giving, spending thousands on presents I knew my family would love. For my father, rare fishing gear for his weekend hobby. For my mother, the kitchen renovation she'd been talking about for years. For Jake, the latest electronics and sports memorabilia. My efforts were received with the expected thanks, but the underlying dynamic never shifted. The emotional labor of pretending everything was normal during these visits was exhausting. I'd sit through meals where Jake's minor achievements were celebrated while my promotions and accomplishments went unmentioned. I'd listen to family stories where Jake was the central character and I was barely a footnote. I'd watch old family videos where the camera focused primarily on Jake, occasionally catching me in the background. Last year's holiday was particularly difficult. I had spent over $3,000 on family gifts, including paying for my parents' anniversary trip to Niagara Falls and buying Jake the new iPhone he'd been hinting about. In return, I received a $50 gift card to a chain restaurant that doesn't even have locations in California. The message seemed clear. My value to the family was primarily financial. Despite all this, I continued to hope that things would change, that one day my family would see me, really see me, and not just what I could provide. That hope, as fragile as it had become, was what made the events of this Christmas so devastating. December 23rd started like any other workday. I was wrapping up projects before the holiday break, planning to take a few days off to relax in my apartment since I hadn't made plans to go home for Christmas this year. After the disappointments of previous holidays, I had decided to give myself the gift of a peaceful celebration on my own terms. My parents hadn't pushed hard for my presents when I mentioned staying in California, which I took as respect for my decision, rather than indifference. That evening, exhausted from tying up loose ends at work, I collapsed onto my couch and began mindlessly scrolling through Instagram. That's when I saw it. My cousin Melissa had posted a collection of photos with the caption, "Everyone together for Christmas dinner. So blessed to have the whole family in one place." The first photo showed our extended family gathered around my parents' dining room table, which had been expanded to accommodate everyone. The table was laden with my mother's traditional Christmas dishes: the honey-glazed ham, sweet potato casserole, green bean almondine, and her famous cranberry chutney. Christmas crackers and name cards decorated each place setting, and everyone was wearing the paper crowns that my father insisted were part of a proper Christmas celebration. In the center of the second photo was Jake, seated at the head of the table, in what had always been my father's spot, beaming as he held up what appeared to be a gift certificate of some kind. My parents flanked him, their faces glowing with pride. My aunts, uncles, cousins, and even my grandmother, who rarely traveled anymore, were all there, glasses raised in what appeared to be a toast. I stared at the images, trying to process what I was seeing. The timestamp on the post indicated it had been shared just 3 hours ago. The dinner had already happened. The family Christmas dinner had already happened, and I hadn't been invited. I zoomed in on the photos, scanning for any sign that my absence had been noticed or mentioned. There was none. No empty chair, no reference to me being missed, no indication that the family gathering was incomplete without me. In the group photo, the family had arranged themselves perfectly, with no gaps in the composition that might suggest someone was missing. The slow, painful realization washed over me in waves. This wasn't a last-minute gathering. The formal table setting, the traditional menu, the coordinated outfits, all pointed to an event that had been planned well in advance. An event that everyone in the family knew about except me. My hands shaking slightly, I sent a text message to my mother. Saw Melissa's photos of Christmas dinner. Looks like everyone had a great time. Her response came 20 minutes later. Oh, that was just a small thing we threw together. Since everyone happened to be in town, just a small thing. With name cards, the full traditional menu, and every single member of the extended family present. I took a deep breath and called my father's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a brief message asking him to call me back when he had a chance, trying to keep my voice steady. Next, I called my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who had always been a bit more straightforward than the rest of the family. Ross, Merry Christmas, she answered cheerfully. How are things in California? Good, Aunt Patricia. I just saw the photos from dinner tonight. Looks like I missed quite a gathering. There was an awkward pause. Oh yes. It was lovely to have everyone together, she said, her tone careful. We missed having you there. Of course, I would have loved to come, I said slowly. If I had known about it. Another pause. Longer this time. You didn't know? I assumed you couldn't make it because of work or something. Your mother said you were too busy to come home this Christmas. The conversation continued, with my aunt gradually revealing more details that confirmed my suspicions. The dinner had been planned for weeks. Everyone had received formal invitations. There had even been discussions about what to get me for Christmas, which had apparently been resolved by my mother telling everyone I didn't need anything this year. After hanging up with my increasingly uncomfortable aunt, I reached out to a few cousins, who all had similar reactions. Surprise that I didn't know about the dinner, followed by awkward attempts to change the subject. My cousin Tyler, who had always been closest to me, was the most direct. "Man, I asked your mom specifically if you were coming, and she said you had declined because you had too much going on at work. I thought it was weird since you usually make it home for Christmas, but she seemed so sure." I sat alone in my apartment, the glow of my Christmas tree, the only light in the room, trying to process the deliberate exclusion. My first instinct was to find a rational explanation, something that would make this all a misunderstanding, rather than a calculated rejection. Maybe they really did think I was too busy. But I had explicitly told my mother during our Thanksgiving call that I was available for Christmas and was waiting to hear the family plans. Maybe there was a last-minute change and they couldn't reach me. But everyone else had been notified and managed to attend, including my grandmother, who lived in a nursing home 2 hours away. My roommate Mark came home around midnight and found me still sitting in the semi-darkness, staring at my phone. "Dude, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I showed him the photos and texts, and his expression shifted from confusion to anger on my behalf. "Ross, I don't want to overstep, but this isn't a one-time thing. Remember Thanksgiving when they told you dinner was at 4? But when you called at 3 to say you were on your way from the airport, they were already eating because plans changed? Or your dad's retirement party that you only found out about from Facebook after it happened?" This is a pattern, man. Mark's observations hit hard because they were true. There had been multiple instances of being excluded or being the last to know about family events. I had always made excuses for these situations, believing they were oversights rather than intentional exclusions. But seeing the Christmas dinner photos made it increasingly difficult to maintain that belief. As Christmas Eve arrived, with still no proper explanation from my parents, the hurt deepened. I received a generic Merry Christmas Eve text from my mother, as if nothing unusual had happened. My father never returned my call. Jake posted several photos from a holiday light show he had attended with our parents. Again, with no acknowledgement of my absence. I decided not to confront them directly yet. Part of me still hoped there was an explanation forthcoming, that someone would acknowledge the hurt they had caused and make amends. So I responded to texts with brief, polite messages and continued to wait for the recognition that never came. That night, I declined invitations from friends to join their holiday celebrations, not wanting to explain the family situation and unsure if I could maintain a festive facade. Instead, I ordered Chinese takeout and watched Die Hard, trying to convince myself that this was the independent Christmas I had wanted all along. But as I went to bed that night, the last thought before sleep took me was a painful realization. In my family's Christmas story, I had become a character so insignificant that my absence didn't even warrant an explanation. Christmas morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle in San Francisco, matching my mood perfectly. With no presents to open or family traditions to observe, I made myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop, half hoping to find holiday wishes from friends or colleagues to brighten the day. What I found instead was an email from my mother that would take the family dynamic to an entirely new level of dysfunction. The subject line read, "Jake's Disney Cruise Package, your contribution." With a growing sense of disbelief, I opened the email to find a detailed invoice for an 8-day Disney cruise for Jake, his wife Amy, and their 2 children. The message began without any holiday greeting or acknowledgement of the family dinner from which I had been excluded. "Ross, as you know, Jake has been going through a difficult time since losing his job at the sporting goods store last month. We've all agreed that what his family needs is a special vacation to lift their spirits and give them quality time together. After researching options, we've settled on a Disney cruise package for spring break. The total cost comes to $8,100, which we're dividing among family members. Your portion is detailed below." The invoice breakdown followed. Premium suite accommodation. 8 days. 4,200. First class flights to Orlando. $2,300. Special dining packages and excursions, $1,600. Spending money for souvenirs and extras, $800. Total, $8,100. Below the financial breakdown was an additional note. We know this is a substantial amount, but as the most financially successful member of the family, we're counting on your generosity. Jake really needs this break after everything he's been through. You can process the payment through the family credit cards you keep active for emergencies. We've already told Jake and the kids about the cruise, and they're so excited. Payment is needed by the 2nd of January to secure the booking. The email was signed simply Mom with no Merry Christmas or any other holiday sentiment. I read the email 3 times, trying to comprehend the audacity of it. Not only had I been excluded from the family Christmas gathering without explanation, but now I was being presented with an invoice for over $8,000 for my brother's luxury vacation, as if it were a foregone conclusion that I would pay it. The details of the invoice were equally galling. First-class flights when economy would have been perfectly adequate. A premium suite, rather than a standard cabin. Special dining packages and excursions that added thousands to the base cost. And $800 in spending money for souvenirs that would likely be forgotten within weeks. Most telling was the justification. As the most financially successful member of the family, not as a beloved son or brother, not as someone they valued for who I was, but as a financial resource to be tapped for my brother's benefit. After taking some time to calm down, I sent a carefully worded email back. Mom, I'm a bit confused by this invoice. I wasn't aware of any family decision regarding a cruise for Jake. When was this discussed? Also, I noticed the family gathered for Christmas dinner yesterday. I would have loved to join if I had been invited. Her response came quickly and was dismissively brief. Everyone agreed it would be a nice thing to do for Jake. As for dinner, it was just a casual gathering that came together last minute. Nothing for you to worry about. So for the cruise payment, can we count on you to process it by the end of the week? The travel agent needs to finalize everything. I waited an hour before responding again, hoping my mother might realize how her message had come across and offer some acknowledgement of the dinner exclusion or the presumptuous nature of the invoice. When no follow-up came, I decided to call instead, thinking a direct conversation might break through the strange disconnect. The call went to voicemail after 4 rings. 10 minutes later, I received a text. Can't talk now. In the middle of opening presents with Jake's kids. Will call later. As I was processing this, an email from my father arrived with the subject line, Cruise Payment Timeline. It read like a business communication, rather than a message from father to son. Ross, your mother informed me you had questions about the payment schedule for Jake's cruise package. We need the full amount processed by the 2nd of January to take advantage of the early booking discount. If you prefer to split it into 2 payments, we can arrange that. But the first half would need to be processed immediately. Let me know your preference. Again, no holiday wishes, no acknowledgement of my exclusion from Christmas dinner, no recognition of me as anything other than a funding source. The final communication that broke my resolve came from Jake himself. A text message with multiple exclamation points and emojis. Thanks, bro. Just heard about the Disney cruise. Kids are freaking out. Only 82 days until we sail. You're the best. The message made it clear that Jake had already been told I was paying for the cruise without anyone bothering to actually confirm with me first. The presumption was absolute. Ross will pay. Because Ross always pays. In that moment, something crystallized for me. I wasn't being valued as a son or brother. I was being valued as an ATM, expected to fund my brother's lifestyle while being excluded from actual family experiences. The Christmas dinner exclusion and the cruise invoice weren't separate issues. They were 2 sides of the same coin, revealing exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. I decided to make one more attempt at addressing both issues directly. I sent an email to both parents, I'm still confused about why I wasn't invited to the Christmas dinner that was clearly planned well in advance, with formal invitations sent to everyone else in the family. As for the cruise, I'm uncomfortable with both the amount being requested and the assumption that I would pay it without being included in the decision-making process. Can we please have an honest conversation about what's happening here? The response was a family-wide silence. No calls, no texts, no emails for the next 24 hours. Then, on December 26th, a brief email from my mother. The dinner wasn't a big deal, Ross. As for the cruise, everyone is contributing what they can. We thought you'd want to help your brother during this difficult time. The payment needs to be processed soon to hold the reservation. The avoidance of the real issues was so blatant, it was almost laughable. Almost. Instead, it was the final confirmation that my family wasn't interested in addressing the real problem, their pattern of taking me for granted, while excluding me from the emotional benefits of family membership. As I sat with this painful reality, memories began flooding back of all the times this pattern had played out before. The invoice wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of a lifetime of similar treatment, and it was time for me to decide if I would continue to accept it. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying instances of the same pattern throughout my life. Moments I had individually rationalized, but which collectively told a devastating story. My high school graduation came vividly to mind. Jake, a sophomore at the time, had been struggling with algebra and had finally managed to pull his grade up to a C-. The day before my graduation ceremony, my parents surprised him with a used convertible as a reward for his academic improvement. When I asked what the occasion was for such a large gift, my mother said, "We want to encourage his progress. You know how school is harder for him than it was for you." The next day at my graduation, where I was valedictorian and had earned a full scholarship to Stanford, my parents gave me a watch. Not a cheap watch, but certainly not comparable to a car. When I thanked them, my father said, "We knew you'd want something practical. You've always been the sensible one." Then there was the incident during my college years when Jake had been arrested for public intoxication and minor property damage after a party got out of hand. My parents called me at 2 a.m, asking if I could send $1,500 for bail and legal fees because they were a little short this month. I transferred the money immediately, worried about my brother. What I didn't learn until much later was that my parents had just returned from a Caribbean cruise and were short on funds because of their vacation, not because of any financial emergency. Jake never paid back the bail money, and when I brought it up months later, my mother said, "He's your brother, Ross. Family helps family without keeping score." During my second year at Stanford, my parents organized a family vacation to Yellowstone. I worked extra hours at my campus job to afford the flight home and contribute to the trip expenses. During the vacation, I paid for several activities and meals for everyone. Yet in the family photos from that trip, I was often missing because I had been asked to take the picture, or I was partially cut off at the edge of the frame. The official family photo that my mother had printed and framed for the living room showed my parents and Jake in the center, with me barely visible behind them. Jake's wedding was another painful memory. As his only sibling, I expected to be asked to be the best man, or at least a groomsman. Instead, Jake chose his 3 fraternity brothers, despite having dropped out of college after 1 semester. I was asked to handle the payment for the open bar when the final bill came in higher than expected, and $2,800 expense that was presented to me as an urgent crisis during the reception. "The bar is threatening to shut down if we don't pay the overage," my father had said, pulling me aside during the father-daughter dance. "Your mother and I are tapped out from paying for everything else. Can you take care of it?" I paid without hesitation, not wanting to ruin Jake's day. During the speeches that followed, Jake thanked his parents for making this perfect day possible, and his friends for always being there through thick and thin. There was no mention of his brother who had just covered a significant wedding expense. As these memories surfaced, I began calculating how much financial support I had provided to my family over the years. Small transfers for temporary tight spots, larger contributions for family emergencies. Christmas and birthday gifts far more expensive than what I received in return. Picking up checks at restaurants. Covering travel expenses for family visits. When I added it all up, the total was staggering. Over $43,000 in just the past 5 years. And that didn't include the numerous times I had paid for meals, entertainment, and other expenses without keeping receipts. Curious about the full picture, I pulled up my credit report and discovered concerning activity on the family credit cards I had kept active for emergencies. There were charges for expensive restaurants in Chicago that I had never visited, retail purchases at high-end stores, and even spa services, all on dates when I had been in California. It appeared that the definition of emergency had become quite flexible. The following day, still reeling from these realizations, I had a scheduled session with my therapist, Dr. Phillips, whom I had been seeing for anxiety issues I now recognized were largely related to my family dynamic. What you're describing sounds like a classic golden child scapegoat dynamic, Dr. Phillips said after I recounted the Christmas dinner exclusion and invoice situation. In family systems like this, one child is idealized and protected from consequences, while another is held to higher standards and often exploited for their strengths. But why? I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. What did I do to deserve this role? It's not about anything you did, she explained gently. These dynamics usually form based on the parent's unresolved issues and needs. Your academic success and self-sufficiency may have made you seem like you needed less nurturing, while your brother's struggles triggered their protective instincts. Over time, these roles become entrenched and self-reinforcing. Her explanation made intellectual sense, but did little to ease the emotional pain. Still, it helped to have a framework for understanding what had been happening all these years. To know that it wasn't my imagination or oversensitivity. That afternoon, I met my friend Carlos for lunch and shared the situation with him. Carlos had known me since college and had witnessed some of the family dynamics firsthand during visits. Ross, I've seen how they treat you, and it's not right, Carlos said firmly. The fact that they excluded you from Christmas but still expect you to fund Jake's luxury vacation isn't just hurtful, it's manipulative. They're exploiting your desire for family connection and approval. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting, I admitted. Maybe the dinner really was last minute. And maybe the cruise is something they truly believe I should contribute to. Carlos shook his head. That's the conditioning talking. They've trained you to doubt your own perceptions and accept their treatment as normal. It's not normal to exclude someone from family Christmas, but ask them for $8,000 the next day. His blunt assessment was jarring but necessary. I had become so accustomed to rationalizing my family's behavior that I needed someone to state the obvious. Later that week, I had coffee with my coworker Jennifer, who had mentioned going through similar family issues. Her perspective was equally valuable. I was the responsible one in my family too, she shared. My brother would create disasters, and I was expected to clean them up. It took me years to realize that by continuously rescuing him, I was preventing him from learning to stand on his own feet. And I was teaching my parents that they could take me for granted. How did you change it? I asked. With clear boundaries and consequences, Jennifer said. I had to be willing to let them be upset with me. I had to accept that they might not understand or support my decision to stop enabling the dysfunction. But in the end, it was the healthiest thing for everyone, including my brother. As I reflected on these conversations, I began to see how deeply I had been programmed to be the responsible one who sacrificed his own needs for the family. From childhood, I had been trained to believe that being overlooked was the price of being capable, that funding Jake's lifestyle was my duty as the more successful sibling, that questioning the fairness of it all was selfish and petty. My emotions evolved from hurt to anger to a steady, clear determination. This wasn't just about an excluded dinner invitation or an outrageous invoice. This was about recognizing a lifetime pattern and deciding finally that I deserved better. That evening, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years, documenting my feelings and my decision to change the dynamic. I've spent my entire life trying to earn my place in a family that sees me primarily as a resource rather than a person with needs and feelings of my own. I've funded Jake's lifestyle while accepting emotional crumbs in return. I've made excuses for being excluded, overlooked, and taken for granted. Today, I choose to break this pattern. Whatever happens next, I will no longer participate in a family system that values what I can provide over who I am. With that written declaration, a weight lifted. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt clear about what I needed to do. Once I made the decision to change the family dynamic, I knew I needed to approach it strategically rather than reactively. This wasn't about punishing my family, but about establishing healthy boundaries that would hopefully lead to more balanced relationships. My first step was to consult with financial advisor Sarah Winters about disentangling my finances from my family's prastium. I brought printouts of all the shared accounts, credit cards, and recurring transfers that had accumulated over the years. This is actually quite common, Sarah said as she reviewed the documents. Adult children often find themselves in complex financial entanglements with parents and siblings, especially when they're the most financially stable family member. What's the best way to separate everything without causing unnecessary hardship? I asked. Clean breaks are usually best, she advised. Cancel shared cards, remove authorized users, and close joint accounts. For your own protection, you should also freeze your credit to prevent new accounts from being opened in your name. Family members sometimes feel entitled to take financial liberties when patterns of support have been established. Her mention of credit freezes concerned me. Do you think that's really necessary? Consider it preventative, Sarah said carefully. In situations where financial boundaries are being reset, it's not uncommon for family members to react poorly. I've seen cases where parents or siblings with previous access to financial information have opened new credit lines without permission. Next, I scheduled a consultation with an attorney specializing in family law to understand if I had any legal obligations to my family. The attorney, Michael Greenberg, quickly put my mind at ease. Unless you've signed formal agreements or made legally binding promises, you have no obligation to fund your brother's vacation or any other family expenses, he assured me. Adult children are not legally responsible for the lifestyle maintenance of capable parents or siblings, regardless of family expectations. With the legal and financial aspects addressed, I turned my attention to the psychological preparation for what would likely be a difficult confrontation. I spent the next few days researching family psychology and dysfunctional dynamics, trying to understand the patterns that had shaped our relationships. I found myself particularly drawn to books about setting boundaries with family, highlighting passages that resonated with my experience. The most difficult boundaries to set are with those who gave us life, or those with whom we have shared significant portions of our lives. But these boundaries are also the most essential for our well-being. When you've been cast in the role of family rescuer, your attempts to establish boundaries will often be met with accusations of selfishness or betrayal. This is a normal part of the process as the family system resists change. Financial enabling often masquerades as generosity, but ultimately harms both the giver and receiver by creating dependency and resentment. I also discovered online forums for adult children of emotionally neglectful parents, where others shared stories that paralleled my own. Reading these accounts helped me feel less alone and reinforced that my decision to establish boundaries was both necessary and overdue. The emotional preparation was perhaps the most challenging aspect of my plan. I had to process grief for the family relationship I had always wanted, but never truly had. I had to work through the guilt I felt about standing up for myself, the deeply ingrained belief that doing so was somehow selfish or wrong. My sessions with Dr. Phillips became focused on strengthening my resolve and preparing for the potential fallout. You need to be ready for strong reactions, she warned. When you change a long-established dynamic, everyone in the system feels the disruption. They may try to pull you back into your familiar role through guilt, anger, or even temporary concessions. What if they just cut me off completely? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. That's a possibility you need to be prepared for, she acknowledged. But ask yourself, what kind of relationship are you actually losing if it's conditional on you providing financial support while accepting emotional neglect? It was a painful question, but a necessary one. I had been clinging to the hope of family connection while ignoring the reality of what that connection actually entailed. I also had several conversations with trusted friends about my plan, both to strengthen my resolve and to ensure I would have support during what might be a difficult period ahead. I'm proud of you for doing this, my roommate Mark said. And I've got your back. Whatever happens, if you need to not be alone after you send that message, I'll cancel my plans and will do something to keep your mind occupied. My friend Elena, who had known me since college, offered similar support. This is long overdue, Ross. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you can provide. And remember, family isn't just about blood. We're your family too. The one you chose, and the one that chooses you back every day. Armed with this support network, I developed a detailed plan for establishing my new boundaries. First, I created an inventory of all the shared financial accounts and connections that needed to be addressed. There were 7 credit cards where my parents or Jake were authorized users, 2 joint bank accounts established years ago for family emergencies, and several automatic monthly transfers to my parents' accounts that had been set up during past financial crises but never discontinued. I decided that December 28th would be the day to execute the plan, after the immediate holiday period, but before the January 2nd deadline my parents had set for the cruise payment. Next, I drafted the note that would accompany the symbolic $1 bill I planned to send. I wanted it to be clear, but not cruel. A statement of my new boundaries, rather than a vindictive attack. After several drafts, I settled on the simple message: Santa skipped me too. Merry Christmas. It referenced both my exclusion from the family celebration and my refusal to continue funding Jake's lifestyle, while avoiding lengthy explanations that could be argued with or manipulated. I also prepared for the aftermath by scheduling check-ins with friends for the days following my action. Mark would be home the evening of the 28th. Carlos and I had lunch planned for the 29th. Elena would call on the 30th. Having these touch points arranged in advance would ensure I wasn't facing the family fallout in isolation. Additionally, I prepared practical measures, setting up a new phone number I could transition to if the bombardment of calls and messages became too much, creating email filters to organize the expected communications from family, and planning self-care activities for the difficult days ahead, including a hike in Muir Woods and a massage appointment. As the date approached, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and calm. The anxiety came from anticipating the conflict and potential loss, while the calm stemmed from the certainty that I was finally acting in alignment with my own self-worth. The night before implementing my plan, I wrote one final journal entry. Tomorrow, I take back my power in this family dynamic. I'm not doing this out of anger, though I have every right to be angry. I'm doing this out of self-respect and the hope that maybe, just maybe, it will lead to more authentic relationships with my family members. If it doesn't, I'm prepared to accept that too. Either way, I will no longer be the invisible ATM expected to fund the family while being excluded from its emotional benefits. Whatever happens next, I know I'm doing the right thing. Not just for me, but ultimately for all of us. With my plan in place and my resolve strengthened, I went to bed early, knowing the next day would mark a turning point in my family relationships, one way or another. December 28th dawned clear and cool in San Francisco. I had taken the day off work to focus entirely on executing my plan, starting with the financial separations. At 9 in the morning, I began systematically calling each credit card company to cancel the shared cards and remove authorized users. The first call set the tone for what would follow. The customer service representative was professional, but curious about the sudden cancellation of a card that had been active for years. "May I ask the reason for closing this account today, sir?" she inquired. "I'm simplifying my financial situation," I replied, using the script I had prepared. "I need to close this account immediately and would like confirmation in writing that it's been closed." "Certainly, I can help with that. I see there are additional users on this card. Would you like to speak with them before proceeding?" "No, that won't be necessary. I'm the primary account holder, and I'm exercising my right to close the account." The process repeated with 6 more cards, each call following a similar pattern. Some representatives asked more questions than others, but all ultimately processed my requests. By 11:30, all 7 shared credit cards had been canceled, with confirmation numbers noted in my spreadsheet. Next came the bank accounts. I visited my local branch in person, preferring to handle these more complex changes face-to-face. The personal banker, a woman named Tanya, reviewed my identification and account information before proceeding. "I see these are joint accounts with family members," she noted. "Are you looking to remove yourself from these accounts or close them entirely?" "Close them entirely," I said firmly. "I'd like any remaining funds transferred to my individual account." "I understand. Just to make you aware, as joint account holders, the other parties will be notified of this closure automatically through our system." I nodded, having anticipated this. "That's fine. I'm prepared for that conversation." As Tanya processed the paperwork, she maintained a professional demeanor, but I could sense her curiosity about the sudden financial separation. Just as she was completing the transactions, my phone buzzed with a text notification from my mother. The automated alerts had already begun reaching my family. "All set, Mr. Lane," Tanya said, handing me the confirmation documents. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, thank you. This takes care of everything." I deliberately left my phone in my pocket, not yet ready to engage with the inevitable reactions from my family. Instead, I focused on completing the plan. My next stop was the post office, where I purchased a simple greeting card. Inside, I placed a crisp $1 bill and the handwritten note, "Santa skipped me too. Merry Christmas." The symbolism of the single dollar was intentional. It represented both the minimum gift one might give to acknowledge someone's existence and a stark contrast to the $8,100 I had been expected to provide for Jake's cruise. It said, "I acknowledge you exactly as much as you have acknowledged me." As I dropped the envelope into the mailbox, I felt a mixture of anxiety and relief. The action itself was small, almost anticlimactic, but its significance was enormous. For the first time in my adult life, I was refusing to play my assigned role in the family dynamic. By the time I returned to my apartment, my phone showed 12 missed calls and 23 text messages. The cascade of family reactions had begun in earnest. The first voicemail was from my mother, her tone confused and slightly panicked. "Ross, the strangest thing just happened. My card was declined at Nordstrom. Can you call me right away? There must be some mistake with the bank." The second voicemail, recorded just 15 minutes later, had a different tone. "Ross, I just got a notification that all the cards have been closed. What's going on? Call me immediately." The third showed the beginning of anger. "This is not funny, Ross. Your father and I are stranded at the mall, with no way to pay for parking. Call us back right now." Each subsequent message showed the progression from confusion to disbelief to outright anger. My father's messages followed a similar trajectory, starting with business-like inquiry and escalating to thinly veiled threats about family loyalty and obligations. Jake's texts were the most direct in their accusatory tone. "WTF did you do? Mom says all the cards are dead? Are you trying to ruin Christmas for my kids? The cruise deposit is due in 5 days. You can't just cut people off without warning. That's messed up, bro. Mom is crying. Hope you're happy with yourself. By evening, the extended family had been recruited to the cause. Aunts, uncles, and cousins began reaching out, most having heard a version of events that cast me as having some sort of breakdown or crisis. Ross, honey, we're all worried about you. My Aunt Patricia's message began. Your mother said you've been acting strangely and making concerning financial decisions. Is everything okay? Are you under too much stress at work? My cousin Tyler was more direct. Dude, what's going on? Uncle Richard is telling everyone you've lost it and are cutting off the whole family. Need to talk? Among the chorus of concern and criticism, there was one unexpected message of support. My Aunt Marie, my father's sister, who had always been something of a family outlier herself, sent a private text. I don't know exactly what happened, but knowing my brother and sister-in-law, I suspect you had good reasons for whatever you did. If you need someone to talk to who understands complicated family dynamics, I'm here. No judgment. I chose not to respond to any messages that first day, giving myself time to process the reactions and maintain my resolve. Mark came home as planned and provided welcome distraction with pizza and a movie marathon that kept my mind occupied during what could have been an evening of anxiety and doubt. The next morning brought more messages, including social media posts from Jake that indirectly referenced the situation. Some people think money is more important than family. Sad to see who shows their true colors when times get tough. My mother had moved from angry voicemails to guilt-inducing texts. I don't understand how we raised a son who could do this to his family. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of the stress you've caused. I maintained my silence, not yet ready to engage, until I had processed the full spectrum of their reactions. The $1 bill and note wouldn't arrive for another day or two, and I wanted that message to land before any conversation took place. On December 30th, I received the call that would mark the turning point in the family crisis. It was my father, and his voice when I answered was tight with barely controlled anger. What exactly do you think you're doing? He demanded, without preamble. I'm establishing boundaries, I replied calmly, using the response I had rehearsed with Dr. Phillips. Boundaries? You've financially crippled your mother and me. Without warning, we had plans that depended on those accounts. Jake's kids were counting on that cruise. How could you be so selfish? I'm not responsible for funding Jake's luxury vacation, I said, still maintaining my calm tone. Especially when I wasn't even invited to Christmas dinner with the family. There was a moment of silence on the line. When my father spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. What are you talking about? The family Christmas dinner. The one where everyone was invited except me. The one Melissa posted photos of on Instagram. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear the mental calculations happening. As my father realized I knew about the deliberate exclusion, that was just a small get-together, he said finally, echoing my mother's earlier explanation, but with less conviction. A small get-together with name cards, the full traditional menu, and every single member of the extended family present, I countered. Every member except me. The silence that followed told me the direct confrontation had hit home. When my father spoke again, his tone had shifted dramatically. Your mother mentioned something about assuming you were too busy with work to come home, he said slowly. I didn't realize you hadn't been specifically invited. Before I could respond, I heard my mother's voice in the background, asking questions. My father's muffled explanation to her was followed by what sounded like an argument before he returned to the phone. Ross, your mother wants to speak with you. My mother's voice was tearful when she came on the line. We received your card with the $1. Is that really how you felt? That you were skipped? Like you didn't exist? The direct acknowledgement of my feelings, something so rare from my mother, momentarily took me aback. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly how I felt. I didn't think. I mean, you're always so busy and successful in California. I just assumed you wouldn't want to bother with a family dinner. Mom, I explicitly told you during our Thanksgiving call that I was available for Christmas and was waiting to hear the family plans. "I thought you were just being polite," she said, her voice small. "You haven't seemed interested in family things for years." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. My perceived lack of interest had been a defense mechanism against years of being overlooked and undervalued. "And the cruise invoice?" I asked. "Why would you assume I'd pay for Jake's luxury vacation when I wasn't even included in the decision to plan it?" There was a long pause before my mother responded. "I suppose we've gotten used to counting on you for financial help. Jake has always struggled, and you've always been so capable. Being capable doesn't mean I don't have feelings or needs of my own," I said quietly. "It doesn't mean I'm just a wallet to bail out Jake whenever he mismanages his life." The conversation continued with a level of honesty that had been absent from our family interactions for as long as I could remember. My mother admitted that the family had come to take my financial support for granted while minimizing my need for emotional inclusion. My father, who rejoined the call, reluctantly acknowledged that they had created an unhealthy dynamic between Jake and me. Jake himself called later that evening, his tone initially defensive but gradually shifting as the reality of the situation became clear. "I never thought about how it looked from your side," he admitted after I explained how I'd felt being excluded while still being expected to fund his lifestyle. "I guess I just got used to you always being the one who had it together, who could fix everything." "I'm still your brother," I told him. "Not your personal bank." "Yeah, I'm starting to see that," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I did ask Mom if you were coming to Christmas dinner. She said she'd invited you, but you were too busy. I should have checked directly with you." That acknowledgement, small as it was, represented the first crack in the dysfunctional family system we had all been maintaining. The simple fact that Jake had thought to question my absence, even if he hadn't followed through, suggested that perhaps I wasn't as invisible to him as I had feared. As the conversation concluded, my father asked the question that marked a genuine turning point. "Why did you feel you needed to do this? To cancel everything so suddenly?" It was the first time in my adult life that any family member had sincerely asked about my motivations, rather than assuming them or dismissing them. I took a deep breath and gave the explanation I had practiced, but never thought I'd actually get to deliver. Because for years, I've been valued primarily for what I could provide financially, while being excluded emotionally. I've funded family expenses and Jake's lifestyle while being treated as an afterthought. I reached a point where I realized that pattern wouldn't change unless I forced it to change. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, to my complete surprise, my father said something I had never expected to hear from him. "I'm sorry, Ross. We haven't been fair to you, and I'd like to find a way to do better." Those simple words, spoken gruffly but sincerely, were the first indication that my actions had accomplished what years of silent hurt and passive acceptance never could. They had made my family finally see me. The weeks and months following my boundary-setting action were neither easy nor straightforward. Real change in established family dynamics doesn't happen overnight, and there were plenty of setbacks along the way. But for the first time, there was also genuine effort toward creating a more balanced relationship. I maintained limited contact with my family for the first 3 months, insisting on clear communication boundaries. Calls were scheduled rather than assumed. Financial discussions were explicit rather than implied. And any signs of slipping back into old patterns were addressed immediately rather than ignored. Our first in-person meeting after the Christmas confrontation was at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between the airport and my parents' home. When I finally visited Chicago in March, the awkwardness was palpable at first, with all of us unsure how to interact under the new relationship terms. "You look good," my mother said tentatively as we were seated. "California must agree with you." "It does," I replied. "I've been spending more time outdoors, hiking on weekends." "That's nice," she said, clearly struggling to find neutral topics. "Your father and I have been thinking about taking a trip out west sometime. Maybe you could show us around San Francisco." It was a small offering, but significant. For the first time, they were considering coming to my territory, rather than always expecting me to return to theirs. The real breakthrough came during a family therapy session I had requested as a condition of rebuilding our relationship. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, created a safe space for expressing long-buried feelings and addressing dysfunctional patterns. Ross has described feeling valued primarily for his financial contributions, rather than as a family member, Dr. Martinez summarized after I had shared my perspective. Can others in the family reflect on that? My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat before speaking. I never thought of it that way. But looking back, I can see how our actions sent that message. We did come to depend on Ross financially, while taking his emotional needs for granted. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I think part of me was jealous of how easily everything seemed to come to Ross. Jake needed so much more attention and help, and I justified focusing on him by telling myself Ross was fine on his own. I didn't want to see that I was neglecting him. Jake's eventual participation in these sessions was perhaps the most surprising development. At first resistant and defensive, he gradually came to acknowledge his role in the family dynamic. "I've been taking advantage of you for years," he admitted during our third joint session. "It was easier to ask you for money than to get my act together, and I think I resented you for your success, so it felt like taking your money was evening the score somehow. That wasn't fair or right." These acknowledgments didn't immediately heal years of hurt, but they were essential first steps in creating a new family narrative based on honesty rather than denial. The financial boundaries I had established remained firmly in place. I maintained separate accounts and made it clear that while I was open to helping in genuine emergencies, I would no longer fund Jake's lifestyle or be the family's financial safety net. This clarity, while initially difficult for everyone to adjust to, ultimately proved liberating for all of us. Jake, faced with the reality that his brother would no longer bail him out, finally began taking responsibility for his financial situation. He secured a stable job at a sporting goods retailer and, for the first time in his adult life, maintained it for over a year. He and his wife created a budget and started building their own emergency fund rather than relying on family bailouts. "It's actually less stressful this way," he confessed during a phone call 6 months after the confrontation. "Knowing I have to solve my own problems, instead of just calling you or mom and dad, has made me more careful with money. I should have done this years ago." My parents, too, made adjustments to their financial habits once they could no longer use me as their backup plan. They consulted a retirement planner, reduced unnecessary expenses, and began making more prudent decisions about their resources. "We should have been more responsible with our planning," my father acknowledged during a visit to San Francisco in June. "Relying on you became a crutch that wasn't good for any of us." As the practical aspects of our relationship improved, so too did the emotional connections. My parents began showing genuine interest in my life and career, asking specific questions about my projects and friends, rather than the generic inquiries of the past. They remembered details I shared and followed up on them in subsequent conversations, small indicators that they were actually listening and engaging. Easter marked the first holiday invitation that felt genuine rather than obligatory. My mother called a month in advance, her voice warm and sincere. "We would love to have you home for Easter, Ross. No pressure, but we're planning a family dinner on Sunday, and it wouldn't feel complete without you. We can work around your schedule if the usual timing doesn't work for you." The explicit invitation, the acknowledgement of my schedule, and the expression of genuine desire for my presence all represented significant shifts from the past pattern. I accepted and found the experience notably different from previous holidays. My accomplishments were acknowledged, my opinions sought, and I was included in family photos and conversations in a way I hadn't been before. While working to rebuild family relationships, I also focused on creating my own traditions and support systems. I hosted Thanksgiving for a group of friends in my apartment, establishing what would become a new annual tradition. I joined a hiking club that met monthly to explore trails around the Bay Area, building connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. I decorated my apartment for holidays in ways that pleased me rather than trying to recreate childhood traditions that had often excluded me. These independent celebrations helped me realize that family connection, while important, wasn't the only source of belonging and joy in my life. I had created a chosen family of friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. And that knowledge gave me strength in navigating the complicated process of family reconciliation. The work of maintaining healthy boundaries continued to require vigilance. There were occasional slips into old patterns. A hint from my mother about Jake's car troubles that seemed to be fishing for financial help. My father defaulting to Jake's defense during a disagreement. Holiday plans announced in family group chats with the assumption I would travel to Chicago rather than a direct conversation about arrangements. But unlike in the past, I now address these issues immediately and directly. Mom, it sounds like you're suggesting I help Jake with his car expenses. Is that what you're asking? Or I notice the holiday plans have already been made, assuming I'll come to Chicago. In the future, I'd appreciate being included in the planning conversation before decisions are finalized. These gentle but firm corrections usually prompted immediate course adjustments and apologies, signs that while old habits died hard, there was genuine willingness to create new, healthier patterns of interaction. The most meaningful change came in the form of balanced family gatherings where I felt truly included. During a summer barbecue at my parents' house, I found myself engaged in a lively debate with my uncle about technology trends, with my father and Jake actively listening and contributing rather than changing the subject or talking over me, as would have happened in the past. When I shared news about a promotion at work, the family offered genuine congratulations and questions rather than immediately pivoting to Jake's latest venture. These moments of normal family interaction might seem small from the outside, but to me, they represented profound shifts in how I was perceived and valued within the family system. The journey of rebuilding trust remains ongoing and complex. There are still moments of doubt, times when a comment or action triggers old hurt and makes me question whether anything has really changed. But these moments are balanced by new experiences that would have been impossible under the old dynamic. Honest conversations about difficult topics, acknowledgement of past hurts, and genuine efforts to create more equitable relationships. What I've learned through this process is that self-worth cannot be outsourced. For years, I tried to earn my family's validation through financial generosity and uncomplaining acceptance of second-tier status. What finally earned their respect was not what I gave them, but what I was willing to withhold: my continued participation in a dysfunctional system that devalued me. The $1 bill and simple note did what years of silent suffering and generous giving could not. It made me visible. It forced my family to see not just what I could provide, but who I was and what I needed from them in return. Family relationships, I've discovered, are not fixed systems, but evolving connections that can be reshaped with courage and clarity. The past cannot be changed, but new patterns can be created. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your family is to refuse to participate in dynamics that harm everyone involved, even when that refusal causes temporary pain and disruption. As I continue navigating this new territory of more balanced family relationships, I remain grateful for the painful clarity that Christmas brought me. The exclusion from dinner and the cruise invoice weren't the problems. They were the symptoms that finally made the underlying disease impossible to ignore. And in recognizing the disease, we all took the first steps toward healing. I wonder how many of you have experienced similar family dynamics. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones to protect your own well-being? Share your experiences in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated family relationships and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary healing.